Well, let me say that by virtue of my position on the Constitutional Business Committee, now I'm past history there, but we, as a committee, as you may know, as you no doubt know, one of our tasks is to review proposed amendments to the Book of Church Order, and then to advise the General Assembly through what is now the Overtures Committee on whether we believe a proposed amendment to the Book of Church Order is consistent with other parts of our PCA Constitution. These amendments to the Book of Church Order, specifically chapter 14, sections 1 and 2, came before us at our meeting in early May of this year. And we spent a fair amount of time looking at the proposed amendments and considering whether they would pass constitutional muster. Now, our committee, our CCB, is a committee of 10 elders, 5 teaching elders, 5 ruling elders. One of each from each category is an alternate, so we only have 8 voting members at a time. We had a full contingent in May. Actually, I think one of our teaching elders was absent, but the alternate filled in. So we had a full vote, and it was an 8-0 vote supporting the resolution that these proposed amendments are in fact consistent with other parts of the Constitutional. They are constitutional in the sense that they are constitutional using that term in the PCA context, not in the federal United States context. There were some clarifying changes made to these proposed amendments by the Administrative Committee after we met in May. As a result, we met again in Nashville at the 38th General Assembly, and we had some other matters on our docket as well, but one of the matters was to examine these clarifying changes to see if they would in any way run counter to what we had opined on in May. And we again discussed the changes, and again by a vote of 8-0 resolved that the proposed amendments in their then final form are indeed consistent with other parts of the Constitution. Now, I need to add that, as I alluded to earlier, we are a body that makes recommendations. We have no authority as such in the sense of in a manner different from, for example, the Standing Judicial Commission. But we do pass on our advice as recommendations again to the Assembly through the Overtures Committee. So twice we have opined on this, and it might be useful just to refer to to the note that we added to our advice as a result of the second scrutiny of these proposed amendments, the revisions to them, because we had heard that it was generating some questions among those at the Assembly. And so we added a note that was not present in our report that arose from our May meeting, but this came out of our meeting in June of this year, and said that there was some discussion within the CCB as to whether these proposed changes are in conflict with the provisions of BCO 25.8 through 25.11 that protect a congregation from attempts by a higher court of the church to secure possession of the congregation's property against its will. In the opinion of the CCB, there is no conflict, as none of the proposed provisions would remove a congregation from the denomination for failure to pay the proposed annual registration fee, nor would they force a congregation to surrender its property, however broadly the term property is construed. The CCB finds no constitutional difference between the provisions of the proposed amendments and the current practice of requiring a registration fee in order for a commissioner to be seated at the General Assembly. Now, I should add, and that was, I should add, I misspoke a few minutes ago. I'm now reminded that at the June meeting, we were missing some individuals, and so that vote was 6-0. Again, 6-0-0 in that there were no abstentions, as opposed to 8-0-0. But our committee represents a good cross-section of the denomination, and these are men who take the Constitution with great seriousness and are well versed in its various provisions. I know that there's been some debate out there concerning these provisions in the Book of Church Order, Chapter 25. And I think, and we don't have time to really explore this in detail, but I think they tend to center on really what is the last sentence of BCO 25:8, which says that the superior courts of the church may receive monies or properties from a local church only by free and voluntary action of the latter. Now, I won't go into the historical background of this provision because in the interest of time, but I think it's important to note that really all that's going on with these proposed amendments from the Administrative Committee is to create a different mechanism for achieving a registration fee. And just as we have individual churches that are not represented at the General Assembly now, and individual teaching elders who are not at the Assembly, that can continue. This has no bearing on, as the CCB has mentioned, has no bearing on the right of a church to withdraw from the denomination. What we certainly don't want that. What we want is that this will be a vehicle for causing churches to really focus on the material need that is critical in order to support this denomination. There are services being rendered by folks throughout these offices here at the PCA. There are an incredible amount of volunteer labor goes into the General Assembly, but the facilities, as we grow as a denomination, increase the attendance at assemblies, it costs a lot of money, and we've got to have some way to fund these efforts, and in a way that's going to create a regular cash flow and upon which reliance can be placed, as opposed to simply awaiting whatever donations may come in whenever they may come in. So I think, again, it's critical to recognize that ultimately this is really no different from a registration fee that we have now. It's just a different mechanism for collecting it, and it does affect the level. Actually, some folks, some churches will end up paying less. My church in Richmond is going to end up paying more, but we're quite pleased to do that if it's part of a group effort, so to speak. But to talk about this as somehow or another interfering with the free and voluntary nature and the connectionalism of our churches, I think is a real stretch. I'm not suggesting that the arguments against these amendments are at all frivolous. I think they're serious arguments. But in the final analysis, upon close scrutiny, I think they simply do not carry the day. And I'm gratified that it's not just my individual view, but the view of my fellow members and colleagues on the CCB, both at the May meeting and again at the June meeting. I think the AC is essentially, I like to think of it as the glue that holds together the denomination. And in that it is that, the fact that we are a part of the PCA, and our church is now it's in its 41st year. We came in by way of the RPCES and joining and receiving back in the early 80s, but have been an enthusiastic member of the PCA ever since, in some ways more so now than ever, just because of all the craziness that's going on across so many institutions of our ecclesiastical institutions across this country. So I couldn't give you, I could take the time to give you a long list of particulars, but if we think of it in more of a global sense, it really is, it's the glue. It keeps all the various components of the PCA functioning, and as functioning as a unified and smooth functioning whole, and as a member church, we are very much a beneficiary of all of that.